All right, NFL Week 14, early bets, early leans, early things to consider. I already did guess the spread over on my TikTok, and I hinted at it. I said this has to be one of the dumbest lines I've ever seen. I already hit it. Of course, I'm talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were on open getting 4.5 at the Tennessee Titans. It's now down to 3.5. I still would like a bite at 3.5. Betting the Jaguars, like I said, plus 3.5. It to me, this is just makes absolutely no sense. And it makes sense that this already got hit from 4.5 down to 3.5. It is juiced to 3.5 Tennessee's way. So maybe a chance 4 pops up again. I still, if you want to take a little piece on Jacksonville plus 3.5, I would certainly still endorse it. And the reason is, for me, like I said it, I don't know which team is better. Okay. And one of them's getting 3.5 points. I used Minnesota as the barometer and guessed the spread because Minnesota in back-to-back weeks played the Jags with Mac Jones starting, and they played Tennessee. So they laid 7 at the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then a week later, Minnesota lays 6 at Tennessee. So again, with Mac Jones, like we know Trevor Lawrence likely isn't going to play in the protocol, ugly hit, all that. But the difference there was 1. And again, those lines kind of bounced around too. Like you can even call them dead even. Now 3.5, 4, 4.5. Like this Tennessee team laid 3.5 to New England at home. And, you know, that game goes to overtime. Like I think it's just a wrong line to me. I think it is an overreaction to Lawrence being out again. We knew he was out against Minnesota. And then Minnesota played Tennessee a week later, and the spread was practically the same. So I like that there. It's going to be that's my favorite bet of the week so far. I grabbed the 4.5 again. If you want to wait till 4 maybe pops up, I'm fine with it. But I'm also, early in the week here, I'm good taking a bite of Jacksonville plus 3.5. Another one I'm looking at, and I guess the spread, I think correctly on this game are in the right ballpark, but Atlanta getting 4.5 at Minnesota. There's still a 5 out there. To me, I'm on Atlanta here. I was on Arizona last week, plus 4 against Minnesota. And this is a battle of what I'm calling like 2 deceiving results. The box scores of these 2 teams' respective games in week 13 do not necessarily reflect the result. So Atlanta, I was on the Chargers against Atlanta. Everyone was saying it was a really bad spot for the Chargers. Look, I get it. I thought the Chargers should still be the better team there. But I'll be honest. Like I said, I felt like I got away with one. Atlanta almost wins the game. You could argue should have won the game. Cousins throws 4 interceptions, and they're still totally in it until the very end. Koo missed a field goal as well in that game, I believe. I just want to double check it. Koo missed a field goal in that game as well. So deceiving box score. And then you could kind of say on the same thing with the Minnesota side that they were lucky to win that game. Arizona goes 1 for 6 in the red zone. Against Minnesota, 6 trips, 1 touchdown. That is ugly. So, I just want to double check that number is correct. Yeah, Arizona, 1 for 6 in the red zone against Minnesota. Minnesota goes 2 for 4. So look, red zone, some teams are just really bad in the red zone, and they're going to be bad the entire season. A lot of it has to do with, you got to be able to run the ball, things like that. But to go 1 for 6, that is certainly, I guess, an outlier, something that you make 6 trips, you should have some better results in that. So again, you have Atlanta with the deceiving box score, and you have Minnesota with a bit of a deceiving box score. I want to buy on Atlanta here in this situation. Also, too, Atlanta was a popular pick over the weekend, and I think that people are going to be nervous or not excited to go bet Atlanta again and get burned by them. Like I said, there's still 5 out there. I guess I would like it to 4. I'm certainly happy with the 5 I got, 4.5. You should be able to still get that if you see it in time. So those are 2 bets I like. We've been doing pretty well with these early bets, early leans type situations, but 2 games I want to talk about, probably the 2 premier games of the weekend. Not really the weekend because this one's going to be a Thursday night game, but Detroit is laying 3.5 at home to the Green Bay Packers. And I'm someone who's been very high on Green Bay this year. I like Green Bay a lot. I bet them like 50 to 1 to win the Super Bowl earlier in the season. And so, because I think they're in that, tier 2 of the NFL here. They're just kind of a step below the likes of Detroit. And I know that line's reflecting it, but these 2 teams played not too long ago. Green Bay's at home, And the spread was the same. Detroit laying 3.5 at Green Bay. I know Jordan Love was kind of battling the groin. It was like, was he going to go? Was he not? And it really came down to the Jordan Love pick six. It was a really close game. You could argue Green Bay really won Green Bay did really win the stats in that game, moved the ball well. But now here is like, is that too much of an adjustment? Is that too much of an overreaction for the fact that Detroit played Chicago close on that short week on Thanksgiving? Like, they did get off to the big lead and they just really fell asleep in the second half. So as a guy who's tried to fade Detroit a number of times this year and a guy who's high on Green Bay, I think there's a possibility you're getting Detroit cheap here. And if this comes down to 3, I really wouldn't mind a bet on Detroit. I try not to bet Thursday Night Football. These two teams are going to be on equal rest, so I guess that sort of helps things. But if you have been someone who really wants to keep backing Detroit, to me here, you would be justified in doing so because you're like, hey, the line's the exact same. Detroit should be getting some home field here. Or, this is too much of an adjustment, let's say, because on a neutral, Green Bay getting 3.5 at home against Detroit. That means they're about 5 on a neutral or so. Green Bay's got a really good home field. Now we go to Detroit. So if it's 5 on a neutral, Detroit should be laying 6.5. Again, that's just from a couple weeks ago. I know things have changed. I know Detroit's banged up as well. Now Detroit's the more, I guess you could say, the more banged up team. But again, equal rest here. So if you're horned up to bet Detroit, I think you'd be justified in doing so. I'm still going to wait around, maybe if 3 pops up. Another one I want to talk about is the Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, as I look at it, Kansas City's laying 3.5, and they're actually getting some love here. I'm seeing it move to 4 a little bit as we speak. To me, like I said with Atlanta in the Chargers, it was a bad spot for the Chargers. They played Monday Night Football. They lose their running back, short week, go across the country to Atlanta. Atlanta was coming off the bye. I think now is the harder spot for the Chargers, right? I think that running back situation is certainly notable. And you get Kansas City here with the rest advantage, who gets a scare with Vegas. And look, Kansas City laid 7 at the Chargers back in September, which meant it was about, 8 or so on a neutral. I know that we do now, after that game, agree that the Chargers are better, but this line being Kansas City 3.5, this is saying 2.5, 2 neutral. I don't know if that's baking in enough of the bad spot for the Chargers here. And again, kind of the bad shape that they're in. It's, they're losing, they've lost 2 in a row now. And like I said, this is a Chargers team that's really banged up, and Kansas City gets that rest advantage. So I want to tell you too, you're going to, they did not lose 2 in a row. They did beat Atlanta, but felt like it easily could have been a loss. So you're going to hear a lot about Mahomes stats this week. Mahomes as a favorite of 3.5 or less, regular season and playoffs, 17-13 against the spread. If it's 3 or less, so I was saying if this could go in the other direction, the Chargers get money and this closes, say 3. Mahomes is a favorite of 3 or less, 17-7 ATS. We know Mahomes' problem, or the Chiefs' problem, is when that spread gets bigger. They're not a great covering team of big numbers. So I think rarely do you get an opportunity to have a favorite that is you're kind of buying low on, right? Kansas City, I think, is a opportunity to do that. And I think the Lions could be an opportunity to do that as well. As I'll dive into it more as we get through the week. So I gave you the 2 bets. I like the Jags plus the points. If you get over 3.5, sure, that's fine. Atlanta, I think 4.5 is about where I would stop there. It's up to you how much you want to risk. I would risk a little bit less because you're not getting the greatest number. And of course, you can always wait, but that is week 14. Enjoy.